Hi, Dr. Miller. It's a great honor to interview you. You are international expert on holistic education and also contemplative education. In your one of your recent books, you also wrote about nonviolence and love. Could we start with the question? Um, of how you became interested in nonviolence?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me. Uh, yes, it started when I was a young American in the mid 60s. And as most young American males at that point were dealing with whether they would be drafted or go to Vietnam. So I started reading more about the Vietnam War, and I decided that uh, the U.S. was really wrong to go there, and I thought that if and Thoreau, one of the first works I read was Thoreau's Civil Disobedience, and he said that if you become an agent of injustice, then I say break the law. So I felt that if I was a soldier in Vietnam, it was just simply wrong. That didn't mean that the people went. It was everybody. It's an individual decision, but I felt very strongly. I wrote a conscientious objector statement, which was more about my stand against the Vietnam War. It wasn't a pacifist statement. It was more about why I would not go if I was called. Well, I was called in 1969, and my wife and I decided that we would go to Canada. Uh, and of course, I was also reading Gandhi quite a bit to get a deeper sense of what nonviolent, and of course Martin Luther King as well, who was still alive at that point. And I was working at Grinnell College in 1960, 67, 68, and he came and gave a talk in 67. So I had the rare opportunity to hear him up close. And so all that, uh, and of course, Gandhi and King were strong proponents of nonviolence. And so all my whole life, I've continued to try to follow their teachings as best I can. And but anyway, so I was drafted, and my wife and I went to Canada in June of 1969. And because I did not report for duty, I was indicted, and I couldn't return to the United States for over 5 years. Uh, but we developed, I did my doctorate at the University of Toronto, and then I was hired by the University of Toronto in what they call one of their field centers. So that was how, and then what I the other thing I should mention is that to deal with the stress that I was dealing with, I started doing yoga. I became interested, I and that had a big effect on me and letting me cope with the stress. So I started doing yoga in 1968. I got interested in Eastern philosophy, and of course, a lot of Eastern philosophy has a lot of nonviolence in it. And then I started doing Vipassana meditation in 1974. And so for the rest of my life, I've been doing both those things. And the the Vipassana meditation, there's one like set of phrase that I think applies a lot to the relationship between contemplation and nonviolence. And it's something like this: the thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed. the deed develops into habit, and the habit hardens into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it be born of respect and love for all beings. So that really catches, in a sense, the essence, I think, that bringing awareness to your thoughts and seeing them arise. So if there is a thought of of harming or violence, you can catch it at its root. Uh, Otherwise, the phrase says, if you don't, it can become a habit and part of your character. And so, if we can catch thoughts of harming at the root, then we have a chance of acting more non-violently. So that's the background, uh, why I've been interested in nonviolence since in my youth. Yeah.
Yeah, this is you already talked about that, but I didn't know the story about drafting and your journey. It's an important journey. And you already talked about the relationship between contemplation and nonviolence. Um, could you talk a little bit more about contemplation and the daily practice of nonviolence? And you mentioned in terms of the role of contemplation to deal with the root of violence. And I'm pretty sure you teach contemplation in your teacher education classes as well. So could you talk a little bit more about what you mean by catch the root of violence in practice of nonviolence?
Yeah. So I think, nonviolence is a practice, just as meditation is a practice. It's something that we have to, if we're going to apply ourselves, that we need to work on it every day. And particularly in the language that we use, uh, and the way that we treat other people, and bringing it into our daily life. Not as, and I think this is really important, because if we just see nonviolence as this abstract ideal, and of course it is an ideal that we aspire to, but it's more of how we can bring it into our daily life and have it as part of how we interact with people. Yeah. Um, I teach a course called the Teacher's Contemplative Practitioner, where we explore some of these, and we just finished that course. Um, and I think, and what I require in the course, or one of my requirements, is that I ask students to meditate every day for 5 weeks and keep a journal. And I give them a lot of choice. I give them eight, so that I don't just say, you have to do this, the one that I do. So I give them 8 different types that they can choose and try to build a practice. And I think so. Over all my teaching career, I've introduced meditation to approximately 3,000 students, mostly teachers. And I think it's one of the most important things I've done as a professor. It's just to introduce them to doing some kind of inner work. And when I started, and my first started in 1988 in my class, and that class was filled with a lot of women at midlife,
Mm.
and they had never had the chance to sit down and have some quiet practice in their life. A woman at midlife often has children and may be looking after their parents, and they used to say, I would feel guilty doing this. And because it's just so, there's so much pressure to be, quote, productive or consuming, producing and consuming, and to have a few moments in the day when you're not, was a revelation to a lot of them. And a lot of them at the end they write a 1 or 2 page reflection, and a lot of them said, I really want to go on. And I did a study with some of them. This is quite a few years ago, but we did a study with whether they were following up and how it was working, and a lot of them had continued. So, um, and of course, at night, like now, this is not a big thing. Like introducing meditation and mindfulness to students in the university. But in 1988, it was very new, and
Yeah.
and I don't, and I did it at the University of Toronto. I think at some universities in the States, it might have been greeted with not much support. Uh, and that's been fortunate at my university. I've had support in doing this for over 30 years. So, uh, and
That, yeah.
yeah,
That's just wonderful. You were a pioneer in doing this kind of work. And I teach students as well, but on a smaller scale. I do find that that sense of the guilt because of the ideal of productivity is prevalent. But usually it leads, when you change your
yes,
life practices, it leads to revelation. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
yes,
Well, you read Gandhi, and Gandhi speaks of nonviolence and Santagrapho as soul force. So, how do you approach that conception of nonviolence in relationship with your own work?
yeah. He talked about soul force or truth force, and I think to me that means that again the practice has to be connected with the deepest part of your being. It can't just be an intellectual
Yeah.
game. And
Hmm.
so when you're talking about soul force, you're talking about the deepest part of yourself and how that can be aligned with nonviolence. So in a sense your whole being, the body, mind, and the spirit. So it's a holistic approach to nonviolence. It's bringing all three together. Yes, we do need the intellect. We need inquiry. And Gandhi, he saw nonviolence as like a science, as a like because again, it's been so rarely practiced up until recently. But he saw it as an investigation. How can we live and practice nonviolence in a mode of inquiry? So so that's involved, but it's also involves the body that we bring our whole being to it, and it connects to spirit. So I think that's what the soul force and the truth force means to me. It that we approach it with our whole being. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Um, You mentioned that you read the biography of John Lewis, and he faced with a major challenge of his time in terms of many people didn't see the relevance of nonviolence. How
Yes.
do you think it's how does that speak to today's situation? We are in a
Yeah.
very terrible, situation. And what do you think that we can do as educators to meet such kind of challenge? I've been doing this for a long time in terms of speaking about
Yes.
nonviolence, and not many people in the beginning really respond to it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Well, I first read he wrote an autobiography that I read many years ago. And of course, he was a follower of Martin Luther King, but he came from a different background. Martin Luther King came from a middle class or even upper middle class family in Atlanta. His father was head of this large black church. But John Lewis came from a rural background. I believe it's Tennessee. when very his family was poor and it was a farmer. He often he refers to raising chickens as one of the he thinks
Yeah.
it's life. So being on the farm and working with animals was sort of a beginning. I think uh, that was and he but he be you know both one of the things about both of them, they became involved in the civil rights movement at a very young age. And Martin Luther King became involved in the bus boycott when he was 25. And John Lewis was a teenager when he started, becoming involved in some of these things. He went to a seminary in Nashville. That's where he went to university. So in Nashville, he started becoming involved in the sit-ins in department stores, and of course he was all with all the people in nonviolence that again like King and Lewis, they were always questioned that it's really irrelevant they're when things are becoming so violent. It just seems out of place. And can't we respond at least in some ways to all the violence with like standing up more with not nonviolence, but in some kind of pushback or something.
Yeah.
And but particularly with John Lewis, uh, he had just embodied nonviolence in his demeanor. He wasn't as articulate as King, but his he people just responded to his being. So he eventually became a member of Congress, and even um, he was able to work with the Republicans because they respected him so much as a person, even though they may not have agreed with his more liberal political views. He was manifested this this quality in his being of non-harming, of non-violence, and also there's kind of a simplicity about his the way he lived his life. So he was inspiring to a lot of people, and of course he took King's idea of the beloved community very seriously, and that's what he tried to like cultivate. And that idea has inspired me a lot too. That I think our classrooms should be beloved communities, which is to me, it's both a place of justice and love. And today in the university, there is a lot of focus on justice, social justice, and equity, but I think the love has been missing, except for a few writers like Bell Hooks. That unless you if you focus on these ideals of equity and uh, diversity and inclusion, just from a intellectual standpoint, you will not be successful. And I think that's why there has been a lot of pushback because it's been so intellectually promoted rather than as a kind of lived experience. And that is what John Lewis was able to do. Uh, he was able to embody these ideas, but not in a way that was inviting to other people, not pushing them away. And unfortunately, we in academia we haven't learned that lesson. And um, again, like Bell Hooks talked about how she wrote a lot about love, and what she said when she started talking about love, her academic colleagues would say, be quiet. This doesn't make sense. and, but that's what we need to talk about. So I wrote a book on love and compassion,
Yeah.
and it talks about 8 different kinds of love. You can't just use love, and you can use it in a broad sense, but it's more important in education to talk about different forms of love and how we can nurture them in different situations. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and especially the notion of embodying nonviolence and in one's own way of living in the world. So educators can do that as an invitation to
Yes.
students and others, and at
Yeah.
least that part we can work, on
Yes.
our inner strengths and embodiment. And you already mentioned this notion of a beloved community, and also the sometimes when we talk about other ideals, we leave out love.
Mhm.
So do you want to talk a little bit more about what you see as Martin Luther King's notion of beloved community and how we can embody that or create that in the classroom setting, as you talked about?
Yes. Yeah. So it has to start with the teacher, the professor. Uh, they have to, first of all, they have to be present,
Mm.
and uh, and that's a real challenge. It means creating a space where you are really present to the students, and you're not. So when they say something, make a comment or whatever, that you listen completely and not react immediately or respond immediately. And so when you are able to do that, you create a space where students feel valued and supported, and they're willing to share their ideas. uh, and that, I think, is the beginning of creating the beloved community. And I'll say also humility. Um, it's easy as a professor because you have this field that you quote mastered, that you can lose this quality of humility. And like one of the, I think, the joys of being a teacher at any level is that you can learn from the students. They have so much to offer. I had many students in my class this semester that I've learned from, and they each, beside doing the meditation, they each did a presentation, and I was moved by several of them. And then of course they write a final paper, and some of those papers were so good I felt they were publishable, and so I learn a lot from my students. And it's like, I mean, you're still a professor. You still have certain powers and responsibilities. So you're not completely unequal, but you can still, you know, you can collaborate. You can work collaboratively with your students, and that helps create the beloved community.
Yeah, thank you. Um, The last question, you have actually already talked quite a bit about holistic education and nonviolence. Just kind of, bring things back to the circle. Um, what do you think about the relationship between holistic education and nonviolence education in terms of infusing the energy of interconnectedness into curriculum and pedagogy?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the two main principles of holistic education to me it's about the whole person, the body, mind, and the spirit, and it's about seeing how everything is interconnected. And of course, ecology helps us with that. And when you see that we are interconnected with all life, then you want to treat all life as sacred. Uh, you want to treat all human beings that in that way, and animals and all life. So the both carry that. I mean, both the nonviolence and the holistic education carry this like deep respect for life, and with that arises the nonviolence. You want to create, a loving environment where people can thrive. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, you said that the holistic education has two uh, branches. One is the attending to the whole person, and the other one is acknowledging interconnectedness and treating our life as sacred. I
Yes.
just
Yeah.
want to clarify.
Yeah. Well, I think it's first of all, it's the interconnectedness. And
Okay.
and then from that, when you see that it is, then like compassion can arises because you see you're interconnected with other beings.
Mm-hmm.
The first principle is interconnectedness, like
Mm-hmm.
seeing uh, how life is all interconnected, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to live your life in a way that brings that you carry that awareness into in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
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 yeah, that's pretty much, I really totally agree with that in terms of the priority of interconnectedness. And
yes, yes,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Thank
and it
you.
yeah, it becomes like uh, unfortunately our education system focuses a lot on the individual, and and they end up feeling separate rather than connected.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
uh, so if we can create environments where they do begin to see the interconnectedness, then the compassion arises naturally. You don't have to like preach about compassion or love
Hmm.
because it arises from their understanding of things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate the uh, uh, what you talk about in terms of compassion can arise naturally rather
Yeah.
than, trying to impose it. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, that's important. Thank you very much. This is a very enlightening conversation. I learned a lot from it.
Okay. Thank you for having me. And again, I'm really appreciate and support the work you're doing.
Thank you.